Hello everybody and welcome to the second video in our series of videos on the Renaissance. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know how the Medici came to be the most powerful family in Florence. You guys should know how Lorenzo was a patron of the art, Lorenzo the Medici. And third, you guys should know who the Sforza family were and where they ruled. So today we are going to take a closer look at one of the 5 factors we discussed in our last video, the wealth of the Italian city-states. And more specifically, we're going to talk about the wealthy people in these states that were willing to fund the painters and the sculptors and the architects to create the masterpieces of the Renaissance. These rich people who paid artists to create the works were known as patrons. And possibly the most famous of these patrons were the Medici family. Now, the Medicis were bankers from the city-state of Florence, and banking really it transformed in Italy in the years prior to the Renaissance. It began when a custom official known as Fibonacci revolutionized maths in Italy. He moved away from the Roman numeral system to this new Hindu-Arabic system, which introduced decimals. This could be applied to bookkeeping and used for making and lending of money. Now, the Medici, who were bankers, were part of the Money Changers Guild. And at the beginning, they were more like gangsters than bankers in the middle of the 14th century. However, their fortunes began to turn under a man called Giovanni de' Medici in the 1380s. Now, to understand what was going on at the time, the Catholic Church had banned usury as a sin. Now, usury is lending money in return for interest. So you couldn't lend money and then get an interest back. So this meant bankers like the Medici were unable to do this traditional type of lending. Generally, if you needed loans, you would need to loan from the bankers in the Jewish community, because it wasn't a sin in their religion to loan to people who weren't friends. But the Jewish people were heavily discriminated against in Italy at this time. Now, this essential service of lending money so that trade could keep going, that the Jewish community provided, it was used as another excuse to stir anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic feelings. So, with this route closed, Giovanni and his son Cosimo, who would take over the business in 1420, they began to use really effective bookkeeping using the Fibonacci system. They used currency exchange, and they were trading in bills of exchange, which was basically buying IOUs. You'd buy them for a fraction of the price that was promised in the IOU, and then you would cash in the IOU when the person had the money to pay, and you'd make a profit. And they gained an enormous amount of wealth and influence by the bills of exchange, by their bookkeeping, and by their currency exchange. By the 1430s, even though Florence was technically a republic in name, it was ruled by the Medici family. They became so powerful that 4 Medici were made popes in the space of 100 years, and 2 Medicis became the queens of France. As far as patronage for the Renaissance, however, the most famous Medici was Lorenzo the Medici, or Lorenzo the Magnificent, which is a pretty cool nickname to get for yourself. So he became ruler at the age of 21 in 1469. He survived an assassination attempt by a rival family known as the Pazzi, who were jealous of the Medici's power. And then he went on to sponsor many important pieces of art and literature. So what did he do? So he collected many of those ancient manuscripts that flooded into Italy after the fall of Constantinople, and he paid the scholars to copy these manuscripts. We saw the scholars and the manuscripts coming in after the fall of Constantinople in our last video. He also set up the Platonic Academy, which was a place where scholars could meet and discuss these writings that they were copying down, and this really helped to further the humanist philosophy which had emerged with Petrarch. Remember, humanism was really a focus away from all things to do with God and looking more at the human nature. And of course, many of the Greek philosophers would have written before the time of Christianity. So to be reading these things would really push them towards humanism more. He also sponsored artists like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Botticelli, and Verruccio. And he also set up a school of sculpture where Michelangelo trained. Now, another great centre of patronage was here in Milan. It had been ruled by the Visconti family for about 170 years. Uh, when they died out, they attempted to establish a republic like many of the other Italian city states in 1447, but within 3 years it was under control of this powerful Sforza family who would rule for 70 years. They sponsored great buildings in Milan like the Sforza Castle and the Holy Mary of Grace Church, while also sponsoring artists like Da Vinci and his famous Last Supper, which we will look at when we're looking more closely at Da Vinci. So Florence and Milan had been great rivals and had fought many wars, which was an expensive business. But so in 1454 they signed the Peace of Lodi along with the city-state of Naples, bringing peace to the region temporarily. And this allowed these city-states to spend the money that was being spent on war to now spend this on art and other humanist pursuits. However, it's important to note that not all people at the time were happy with these humanist pursuits and corrupt money grabbing that was going on at the time. They were not happy with this. So in 1497, this Dominican friar named Girolamo Savonarola started a rebellion in Florence where he overthrew the son of Lorenzo the Magnificent, a man called Piero, and he set up a theocracy, which basically is a religious monarchy where God was seen as king. One of the most famous events of Savonarola's rise to power was something called the Bonfire of the Vanities, where they had a giant bonfire where they burned all immoral books and texts, nude paintings and sculptures, anything that they thought was against God and was too indulgent. However, Savonarola was soon overthrown, and the Medici were put back in power, where they continued to rule Florence for a long, long time, and eventually they were made the official Dukes of Florence and in the Republic. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know how the Medici came to be the most powerful family in Florence. You guys should know how Lorenzo the Magnificent was a patron of the arts. And finally, you guys should know who the Sforza family were and where they ruled. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.